Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Perseverance, watching the stars through the wide viewing window. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months, mapping new star systems at the edge of human territory. It was quiet work, but important work. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Choi Yuna from her communication station. She was young but very good at her job. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to understand what her equipment was telling her. Lee Minho walked over to look at her screen. "What kind of strange?" "Ships, sir. Big ones. They just appeared out of nowhere like they have some kind of technology we don't understand." Yuna's voice was worried. "They're not human ships." Park Ji-won looked up from her engineering station. She was the best engineer in the fleet, and she knew human technology better than anyone. "Captain, these readings don't match anything in our database. These ships are using power sources we've never seen before." Kim Tae-hyung, the tactical officer, was already checking his weapon systems.
"Sir, I count 12 ships.
"They're much larger than ours, and they're moving into attack formation." Lee Minho felt his stomach tighten. This was what every human captain feared. Meeting aliens who might not be friendly. "Try to contact them, Yuna. Send them our standard first contact message." Yuna worked at her controls, sending out the peaceful greeting that Earth had prepared for this moment. The message explained that humans came in peace and wanted to talk. But the response came back quickly, and it was not what they hoped for. A huge alien face appeared on the main screen. The creature had gray skin, 4 eyes, and teeth that looked very sharp. When it spoke, the ship's computer translated its words into human language. "I am War Commander Thexval of the Vorthak Empire," the alien said. Its voice was cold and angry. "You have entered our territory. Your ship will surrender immediately, or we will destroy you." Lee Minho stepped forward. He had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for how frightening the alien looked. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the human ship Perseverance. We didn't know this was your territory. We're explorers, not soldiers. Perhaps we can talk about this." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a happy sound. Humans, another weak species that thinks words will save them.
You will surrender now or you will die.
"Choose quickly," Kim Tae-hyung whispered to the captain. "Sir, their weapons are charging. We need to run or fight, but talking isn't working." Lee Minho looked around his bridge. His crew was scared, but they were ready to follow his orders. The Perseverance was not a warship. It had some weapons, but nothing that could fight 12 alien ships. Still, he could not just give up without trying. "We cannot surrender," Lee Minho said to the alien commander. "But we don't want to fight either. Surely there's another way." "Your words prove you are weak," Thexval said. "Weak species exist only to serve the strong. Prepare to be boarded." The alien ships fired their weapons. Strange blue energy hit the Perseverance, and all the lights went out for a moment. When they came back on, half the ship's systems were not working. "They've disabled our engines and most of our weapons," Park Ji-won reported. "But life support is still working. They want to capture us alive." Large alien ships moved close to the Perseverance. Metal tubes extended from their hulls and attached to the human ship's airlocks. The aliens were coming aboard. "All crew, prepare to repel boarders," Lee Minho announced over the ship's communication system. "Use whatever you can find as weapons. Don't make this easy for them." Kim Tae-hyung opened the ship's weapon lockers and handed out the few guns they had. There were not enough for everyone. So many crew members grabbed tools, metal pipes, anything that could be used to fight. The first aliens came through the airlock like a gray wave. They were tall and strong, wearing armor that looked very advanced. They carried weapons that shot energy beams instead of bullets. But they moved slowly, like they expected the humans to just give up. They were wrong. Kim Tae-hyung had studied military history, and he knew about something called guerrilla warfare. Instead of fighting the aliens in the open corridors where they had advantages, he led groups of humans into the ship's maintenance tunnels and engineering sections. The humans knew their own ship better than the aliens did. They used this knowledge to set traps and attack from hiding places. Park Ji-won showed them how to use the ship's own systems as weapons, shutting off lights in sections where aliens were walking, or opening airlocks to create dangerous wind. The aliens had expected an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting in dark, narrow spaces against humans who appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Every corner might hide an enemy. Every doorway might be a trap. One alien soldier chased 3 humans into what he thought was a dead-end corridor. But the humans knew about a hidden maintenance hatch. They escaped while the alien found himself alone in the dark. When he tried to leave, he discovered that the humans had sealed the door behind him. Another group of aliens tried to take the bridge by force, but Choi Yuna had been busy at her station, not just calling for help but also learning how to control the ship's internal security systems. When the aliens reached the bridge door, she made all the lights in the corridor flash on and off rapidly. The aliens could not see clearly, and Kim Tae-hyung's team was able to attack them from behind. The fighting went on for hours. The humans were outnumbered and had worse weapons, but they refused to give up. They fought for every corridor, every room, every inch of their ship, but the aliens had more soldiers and their weapons were much better. Slowly, the humans were forced back into smaller and smaller areas of the ship. Many of their friends were captured or killed. Finally, the remaining humans were trapped in the ship's cargo bay. They had no more ammunition and nowhere left to run. The alien soldiers surrounded them, expecting them to surrender. "Your resistance ends now," said an alien officer. "You have fought harder than we expected, but you have lost." Lee Min-ho stood in front of his remaining crew. They were hurt and tired, but their eyes still showed determination. "We may have lost this battle," he said to the alien, "but humans don't break. Remember that." The alien officer stared at the human captain. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a defeated species show such spirit. Most aliens surrendered quickly when they realized they could not win. These humans had fought until the very end, even when they knew they would lose. As the humans were led away in chains, the alien soldiers talked quietly among themselves. They had won, but it had not been easy. These humans were different from other species they had conquered. These humans were dangerous even when they lost. War Commander Thexval received the report of the battle with surprise. His soldiers had won, but they had lost more troops than expected fighting one small human ship. And the humans had never asked for mercy, never begged to be spared. They had fought until they could fight no more. This was not what the Vorthak Empire was used to. This was something new, and Thexval was not sure what it meant. But he knew one thing: these humans would need to be watched very carefully. The prison world of Kethmore was a place where hope came to die. The Vorthak Empire had built it to break the spirits of any species that dared to resist them. The planet was mostly rock and metal, with huge prison complexes that stretched for miles underground. Captain Lee Min-ho and his crew were brought here, along with hundreds of other prisoners from dozens of different alien species. As their transport ship landed, they could see the massive walls and guard towers that surrounded the prison. Energy barriers crackled in the air, and armed Vorthak soldiers watched from every corner. "Welcome to your new home," said the Vorthak guard, as the prisoners were led off the ship. "You will work here until you die, or until you learn to obey the Empire without question." Most choose to obey. The prison was divided into different sections for different species. The humans were put in Section 7, an area of small cells connected by narrow corridors. Each cell was barely large enough for one person, with a hard metal bed and nothing else. Warden Zexthor was in charge of the entire prison. He was older than most Vorthak, with scars covering his gray skin. He had broken thousands of prisoners from hundreds of different worlds. He took pride in his work. "Humans are interesting," he said to his assistants as he watched the new prisoners on his security screens. "They fought harder than expected during capture. Let us see how long that spirit lasts here." But the humans did something that surprised everyone. Instead of becoming sad and giving up like most prisoners, they began to organize themselves. Park Ji-won used her engineering knowledge to study the prison's systems. During work periods, when prisoners were forced to repair equipment or dig tunnels, she carefully looked at every wire and every pipe. She learned how the prison's power worked, how the water flowed, how the air moved through the tunnels. "The security system has weak points," she whispered to Lee Min-ho during their daily meal of thin soup and stale bread. "If we're careful, we can cause problems for the guards without them knowing it's us." Choi Yuna had a different job. She talked to prisoners from other species, learning their languages and their stories. Many had been here for years and had given up hope. But when she told them about how the humans had fought back on their ship, some began to remember what courage felt like. "The Malari were peaceful people before the Vorthak came," said a small, blue-skinned alien named Veltar. "We had beautiful cities and great art. But when the Empire came, we surrendered quickly." "We thought it would save lives, did it?" Choi Yuna asked. Veltar looked sad. "No, the Vorthak took our cities anyway." They made slaves of our children and destroyed our art. We learned too late that surrender only makes bullies stronger. In another part of the prison, Lee Minho met someone who had become very important to their plans. Nam Subin had been a Special Forces soldier on Earth before he was captured in an earlier fight with the Vorthak. He had been in the prison for 6 months, but his spirit was still strong. "I've been waiting for more humans to arrive," Nam Subin told Lee Minho. "I've learned a lot about this place, and I've been making plans." Nam Subin had been busy during his time in prison. He had found other prisoners who still wanted to fight back. He had learned the guards' schedules and found places where they could meet in secret. Most importantly, he had discovered that the prison's layout had flaws that could be used against the guards. Yoon Hyun was another human prisoner, a scientist who had been captured while studying alien biology. She had been using her knowledge to understand their Vorthak captors better. "The Vorthak are strong, but they're not as smart as they think," she explained to the growing group of human resistance fighters. "They believe their own propaganda about being superior. This makes them careless sometimes." The humans began to organize other prisoners into small groups. They taught them military tactics that Nam Subin remembered from his training. They shared engineering tricks that Park Ji-won had learned. They used Choi Yuna's communication skills to coordinate between different species. Slowly, the prison began to change. Small acts of sabotage happened every day. Work equipment would break down mysteriously. Guards would find their communication devices not working. Food deliveries would get lost or spoiled. The Vorthak guards knew something was happening, but they could not figure out what. The humans always looked innocent when questioned. Other prisoners who had been broken and obedient for years were starting to cause problems too. Warden Zexthor called Lee Minho to his office one day. The human captain was brought in chains, but he stood straight and looked the warden in the eyes without fear. "You are causing trouble in my prison," Zexthor said. "Prisoners who were obedient for years are now refusing to work. Equipment is breaking down more often. I think you humans are responsible." Lee Minho looked calmly at the warden. "We're just prisoners doing our assigned work. If your equipment is old and unreliable, perhaps the great Vorthak Empire should build better machines." Zexthor's 4 eyes narrowed with anger. "Do not mock me, human. I have broken stronger species than yours. The Chaldean were fierce warriors, but they learned to obey. The Zarenth could crush metal with their bare hands, but they surrendered to superior force. You will learn as they did." "Maybe," Lee Minho said, "but it will take you longer than you think." That night, the humans put their biggest plan into action. Park Ji-won had discovered that the prison's main power generator had a weakness. If the right wires were crossed at the right time, it would shut down for exactly 13 minutes before backup power activated. During those 13 minutes, all the security cameras would be off. All the electronic locks would default to open. All the guard communication systems would be dead. The plan required perfect timing and cooperation from prisoners all over the prison. When the lights went out, teams of humans and other aliens moved quickly through the dark corridors. They freed prisoners from punishment cells. They stole weapons from guard stations. They captured important computer files that contained information about other Vorthak facilities. Most importantly, they rescued a group of prisoners who were being tortured for information about their home worlds. These prisoners had been given up for dead by their fellow captives, but the humans refused to leave anyone behind. When the lights came back on, the guards found chaos. Dozens of prisoners had been freed. Weapons were missing. Important files had been stolen. And somehow the humans responsible had vanished back to their cells without being seen. Warden Zexthor was furious. He ordered random punishments and increased security. But the damage was done. Word of the successful rescue spread through the prison faster than the guards could stop it. Prisoners who had been broken for years began to remember what hope felt like. They looked at the humans with new respect. If these newcomers could pull off such a daring plan after only a few months, maybe the Vorthak were not as powerful as they claimed. Choi Yuna had also accomplished something during the blackout. She had accessed the prison's long-range communication system and sent a coded message toward Earth. The message was short and simple, but it told Earth's government that humans were alive in Vorthak prisons and that the Empire was not as strong as it appeared. The message also contained information about Vorthak technology and military tactics that Park Ji-won and Nam Subin had learned from observation. This information would be vital for Earth's defense when the Vorthak came again. As weeks passed, the prison became a different place. The humans had turned it into a secret training ground where former enemies learned to work together. Vorthak guards found their jobs getting harder every day. Prisoners who had been model captives for years were now causing constant problems. And in the deepest levels of the prison, the humans were planning something much bigger than midnight rescues and equipment sabotage. They were planning an escape that would shake the Vorthak Empire to its core. Warden Zexthor began to understand that these humans were unlike any species he had faced before. Other aliens broke when separated from their families and homes. These humans seemed to get stronger when challenged. They turned suffering into determination and used their anger as fuel for resistance. For the first time in his long career, the warden began to wonder if some prisoners could not be broken. And that thought scared him more than he wanted to admit. The Vorthak Empire had built their power on the idea that all species would eventually submit to superior force. But these humans were proving that idea wrong one day at a time, and their example was inspiring others to remember what courage looked like. Change was coming to Kethmore, and the Vorthak were not ready for it. The coded message from Choi Yuna reached Earth after traveling through space for several weeks. It was picked up by a monitoring station on the edge of the solar system and quickly sent to military headquarters. Admiral Kwon Jae-ho was in a meeting with the Earth Defense Council when the message arrived. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from deep space," said the communications officer. "It's using an old Earth military code, but it's coming from outside human territory." Admiral Kwon Jae-ho was a veteran of several small conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for what the message contained. As the decoded text appeared on the screen, the room fell silent. "They're alive," he said quietly. "Our people are alive, and they're fighting back." Dr. Han Seo-young, Earth's best military strategist, studied the technical information that came with the message. The data about Vorthak ships and weapons was incomplete, but it was more than Earth had known before. "Look at this," she said, pointing to energy readings from Vorthak weapons. "Their technology is advanced, but it follows patterns we can understand. They're not using magic, just science we haven't learned yet." The Earth Defense Council made a decision that would change human history. Instead of waiting for the Vorthak to attack Earth, they would build a fleet and go after their captured people. It was dangerous, but the message from the prison had given them hope and valuable intelligence. Meanwhile, in the deeper parts of space, the story of human resistance was spreading in ways the Vorthak had not expected. Traders and smugglers carried whispered tales from world to world. The story grew with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. Humans were fighting back against the Empire, and they were not losing. On the peaceful world of Malara, Feltar's cousin received a secret message through underground channels. The message told of how humans in Kethmore prison had rescued prisoners from torture cells and organized resistance among the captives. "Is it true?" asked Melandra, who had lost her brother to Vorthak slave raids. "Are these humans really fighting back?" "The smuggler who brought the message swears it is true," her cousin replied. "He says the humans refuse to surrender, even when they know they cannot win." Similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. The Quellian merchants who traded throughout known space were particularly good at spreading the stories. They had been forced to pay heavy taxes to the Vorthak Empire, but they remembered when trade was free and profitable. "I've heard the human prisoners turned a prison into a training ground," said Quellian Captain Texmanar to his crew. "They're teaching other species how to fight back." Imagine that, slaves becoming teachers of rebellion. The scholarly Etherians, who lived on floating cities in their planet's upper atmosphere, discussed the implications of human behavior in their great libraries. "Fascinating," said Elder Zirthana, as she studied reports from across the galaxy. "Most species submit to the Vorthak because the cost of resistance seems too high. These humans appear to calculate the cost differently." "How so?" asked her student. "They seem to believe that some things are worth dying for. This is not logical by our standards, but it may be effective by theirs." Back on Kethmore, the humans were preparing for their most ambitious plan yet. Nam Subin had discovered that prisoner transport ships arrived every 2 weeks to bring new captives and take others to work camps on different worlds. If they could take control of one of these ships, they could escape and spread their message across the galaxy. The next transport arrives in 5 days. he told the secret council of human leaders. It carries minimal guards because prisoners are supposed to be broken by the time they're transferred. Park Ji-won had been studying the transport schedule and the prison's security procedures. The ship will dock at Landing Bay 3. There are usually only 6 guards on board plus the crew. If we can get to the bay during the confusion of prisoner loading, we might be able to take the ship. Lee Min-ho knew that such a plan would be extremely dangerous. If they failed, many people would die. But he also knew that staying in prison meant slow death anyway, and their escape might inspire others throughout the galaxy. We won't just escape, he decided. We'll take as many prisoners with us as possible, and we'll make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. The plan required coordination between humans and dozens of other species throughout the prison. Choi Yuna had spent months building trust with prisoners from different worlds. Now she used those relationships to organize the largest prison break in Vorthak history. Yoon Hyun contributed her knowledge of alien biology to the plan. She knew which species could survive in different atmospheric conditions, which ones needed special food, and which ones had physical abilities that could help in the escape. When the transport ship arrived, everything happened exactly as planned at first. Prisoners were lined up in the normal way for transfer. Guards were relaxed because this was routine work. But then Park Ji-won triggered a power failure that shut down the security systems in Landing Bay 3. In the darkness, human fighters moved like shadows. Nam Subin led a team that overwhelmed the ship's guards while they were confused by the power failure. Other teams secured the landing bay and began moving freed prisoners toward the ship. But Warden Zexthor had learned from previous human tricks. He had extra guards hidden in areas that were not affected by the power failure. When the escape began, alarms started ringing throughout the prison. The humans had expected this. Lee Min-ho led a group that held the corridor leading to the landing bay, fighting desperately against Vorthak soldiers while prisoners loaded onto the transport ship. The battle was fierce and bloody, with humans using captured alien weapons and improvised explosives. "Go! Get them out of here!" Lee Min-ho shouted to Nam Subin as Vorthak reinforcements arrived. "We'll hold them as long as we can." Nam Subin wanted to stay and fight, but he knew the mission was more important than any individual. The transport ship lifted off with over 200 escaped prisoners from a dozen different species. Lee Min-ho and several other humans were left behind, captured or killed in the fighting. But the escape was only the beginning. As the stolen transport ship fled toward the edge of Vorthak space, the freed prisoners split into smaller groups. Some went to their homeworlds to organize resistance movements. Others joined smuggling operations that could spread the story of human courage throughout the galaxy. Choi Yuna and a group of aliens reached a Quellian trading post where they found merchants, eager to hear their story. The tale of humans who turned a prison into a rebellion training ground spread through the trade networks faster than Vorthak ships could travel. Park Ji-won made it to a Mellery world where her engineering knowledge helped local resistance. Groups build weapons from farming equipment and mining tools. The Melari had been peaceful for generations, but the human example inspired them to remember that peace was worth fighting for. Meanwhile, Nam Subin led a group toward human space, carrying complete information about Vorthak military capabilities and prison locations. The data they brought would be crucial for Earth's planned rescue mission. On Earth, Admiral Kwon Jae-ho received confirmation that the escape had been successful. More importantly, he learned that human resistance had inspired other species to begin fighting back against the Empire. "We're not alone in this," Dr. Han So-young reported to the Defense Council. "The Vorthak have made enemies throughout the galaxy. Our people's example is turning fear into anger and anger into action." The Earth fleet was growing larger every day as volunteers joined from every nation and colony. Civilian ships were being converted into warships. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons based on captured Vorthak technology. But perhaps most importantly, Earth was receiving secret messages from alien resistance groups throughout the galaxy. Species that had been conquered years ago were offering to share intelligence and provide support for human rescue missions. The Vorthak Empire was beginning to realize that they faced a problem they had never encountered before. Previous conquests had been simple: defeat the enemy fleet, occupy the homeworld, and wait for the population to accept their new situation. But humans were different. Human prisoners inspired other captives to rebel. Human escapees spread resistance tactics to conquered worlds. And now human rescue fleets were coming to free their people. supported by a growing network of alien allies. War Commander Thexval, who had captured the first human ship, began to understand that his easy victory had been the beginning of something much larger and more dangerous. The humans had bled when struck, just as the Vorthak expected, but they had not broken, and their unbroken spirit was becoming contagious. Reports came in from across the Empire of increased resistance activity, coordinated attacks on Vorthak facilities, and growing cooperation between different conquered species. At the center of every report was the same pattern: humans leading by example and inspiring others to fight. The galaxy was changing, and the Vorthak Empire was not ready for what was coming. The humans had shown that the Empire was not invincible, and that lesson was spreading faster than Vorthak forces could contain it. Soon, the Vorthak would learn that when you strike at humans, you don't just hit one species. You hit an idea that can spread across the stars. President Moon Jae-won stood before the United Earth Assembly, looking out at representatives from every nation and colony in human space. The Great Hall was quiet as she prepared to make the most important speech in human history. "My fellow humans," she began, "today we face a choice that will define our species for generations to come. We can hide behind our defenses and hope the Vorthak Empire forgets about us, or we can go out there and bring our people home." The assembly erupted in discussion. Some representatives argued that Earth should focus on building stronger defenses. Others insisted that abandoned captured humans would doom Earth to eventual conquest anyway. But when the vote was taken, the result was clear. Humanity would take the fight to the Empire. Admiral Kwon Jae-ho had spent months preparing for this moment. The Earth fleet was unlike anything humans had ever built before. Civilian cargo ships had been converted into carriers for fighter squadrons. Mining vessels had been fitted with weapons designed from captured Vorthak technology. Even luxury cruise ships had been turned into troop transports. "We don't have as many ships as the Vorthak," he told his senior officers at the final briefing, "and our technology is still behind theirs in many ways. But we have something they don't understand. We fight for our families, our friends, our freedom. They fight because they're ordered to." Dr. Han So-young had worked with engineers and scientists to develop new tactics that could give human forces an advantage. Instead of trying to match Vorthak firepower directly, they would use speed, surprise, and unconventional methods. "The Vorthak expect their enemies to fight like they do," she explained to the fleet commanders. "Big ships in straight lines, trading shots until one side loses. We're going to fight like humans instead." The human fleet included ships commanded by officers who had never expected to become warriors. Captain Kim Min-seok had been a cargo hauler before the war started. His ship, the Indomitable, was a converted freighter with armor welded to its hull and missiles strapped to its sides. "I used to carry supplies to mining colonies," he told his crew as they prepared for their first battle. "Now I'm carrying something more important: hope for our captured people." Lieutenant Song Mirai was even younger, fresh out of flight training when the war began. She had volunteered to pilot one of the new fighter designs that Dr. Han So-young's team had developed. The fighters were fast but fragile, designed to hit hard and escape quickly. "These ships are built for pilots who think fast and take risks," her squadron leader had told her. "That means they're built for humans." The human fleet's first target was a Vorthak supply depot in the Kellen system. Intelligence from escaped prisoners had revealed that the depot supplied several prison worlds, including Kethmore. If they could destroy it, they would disrupt Vorthak operations throughout the region. But the humans were not the only ones preparing for battle. Other species throughout the galaxy were watching to see what would happen when humans finally faced the Vorthak fleet in open space. Some, inspired by stories of human resistance, were ready to join the fight if the humans proved they could win. Captain Tex Minar of the Quellian merchant fleet had gathered a group of traders who were tired of paying tribute to the Empire. "If the humans can hurt the Vorthak," he told his fellow captains, "we can help them do it. And if they can't, we'll know it's time to find somewhere else to trade." On Malara, resistance groups led by Park Ji-won had been building weapons and training fighters for months. They were ready to strike at Vorthak facilities on their world, but they were waiting for a signal that the human fleet had succeeded. The Etherian scholars had done something unexpected. They had calculated the mathematical probability of various rebellion outcomes and secretly shared their analysis with resistance groups throughout the galaxy. Their conclusion was simple. If humans could win even one major battle against the Vorthak, it would prove that the Empire could be defeated. When the human fleet arrived at the Kellen system, they found the Vorthak supply depot heavily defended. 6 warships orbited the main supply station, with fighter squadrons patrolling the area. It was exactly the kind of traditional defensive formation that the Vorthak preferred. Admiral Quan Jeho did not attack the way the Vorthak expected. Instead of approaching in formation and trading shots with the enemy warships, he split his fleet into 3 groups that attacked from different directions at once. Dr. Han Seoyoung's unconventional tactics were put to the test immediately. While the main human fleet engaged the Vorthak warships, Captain Kim Min-seok led a group of converted cargo ships in a desperate charge straight at the supply station itself. All ships, remember the plan, Kim Min-seok broadcast to his group. We're not trying to survive this, we're trying to make it count. The Vorthak defenders were confused by the human attack pattern. They had never seen enemies split their forces and attack multiple targets simultaneously. Their formations, designed to concentrate firepower, were not flexible enough to respond quickly to the human tactics. Lieutenant Song Mirai led her fighter squadron in attacks that the Vorthak pilots had never seen before. Instead of engaging in direct combat, the human fighters used hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and then disappearing behind asteroids and debris before the enemy could respond effectively. "These humans fight like insects," complained one Vorthak pilot over the radio. "They sting and run away instead of fighting properly." But the insect tactics were working. Human fighters destroyed Vorthak supply ships and damaged the station's defensive systems. Meanwhile, the converted cargo ships commanded by Kim Min-seok broke through the defensive line and rammed the supply depot itself. The Indomitable struck the station's main power generator in a collision that destroyed both the ship and a large section of the depot. Kim Min-seok and his crew died in the explosion, but their sacrifice disabled the station's shields and weapons. "Now," Admiral Quan Jeho ordered, "all ships target the station." The combined human fleet concentrated their fire on the defenseless supply depot. Within minutes, the entire facility was destroyed in a series of explosions that could be seen from the edge of the system. The Vorthak warships, shocked by the sudden destruction of their primary target, tried to regroup and counterattack. But the human fleet had already begun to withdraw, following Dr. Han Seoyoung's plan to strike hard and escape before the enemy could respond effectively. The battle had lasted only 2 hours, but its effects would be felt throughout the galaxy. For the first time, a Vorthak military facility had been completely destroyed by an enemy attack. The Empire's reputation for invincibility was broken. News of the human victory spread through both official channels and underground networks. On worlds throughout the galaxy, resistance groups that had been waiting for a sign suddenly found the courage to act. The Malari resistance struck at Vorthak administrative centers on their world the same day they heard about Kellon. The Quellian traders began attacking Empire supply convoys. Even the peaceful Etherians started using their advanced mathematics to help resistance groups plan more effective attacks. But the victory had come at a high cost. The human fleet had lost nearly a third of its ships, including the Indomitable and her entire crew. Admiral Quan Jeho knew that Earth could not sustain such losses for long. "We proved we can hurt them," he told President Moon Jae-won over a secure communication link. "But we need allies if we're going to win this war." The allies were already coming. Captain Texmanar arrived at the human fleet's rendezvous point, with 15 Quellian ships loaded with supplies and volunteers. A Malari delegation offered to provide intelligence about Vorthak movements in their sector. Even some Etherian scientists volunteered to help improve human weapons technology. For the first time since the war began, Admiral Quan Jeho felt hope. The human fleet was growing stronger, not just with ships and weapons, but with the support of other species who had found their courage. The Vorthak Empire was facing something they had never encountered before: a galaxy-wide rebellion led by a species that refused to stay defeated. Every victory inspired more resistance. Every act of defiance encouraged others to join the fight. War Commander Thexaval received orders to assemble the largest Vorthak fleet in decades and crush the human rebellion before it could spread further. But as he prepared his ships for battle, he wondered if it was already too late. The humans had done something that seemed impossible. They had made the galaxy believe that the Empire could be beaten. And belief, Thexval was learning, could be more dangerous than any weapon. The final battle was coming, and for the first time in the Empire's history, the Vorthak were not certain they would win. The humans had bled when struck just as expected, but their blood had become a seed that was growing into something the Empire could not control, the idea that freedom was worth any price. Soon, that idea would be tested in the greatest space battle the galaxy had ever seen. The Nexus system was the heart of the Vorthak Empire, home to their largest fleet base and the seat of their military command. It was here that Supreme Admiral Korthvak had assembled over 300 warships to crush the human rebellion once and for all. "These insects have caused enough trouble," he declared to his fleet commanders. "We will destroy every human ship, capture every human survivor, and make examples of them throughout the galaxy. No species will ever again dare to challenge the Empire." But the humans were not coming alone. Captain Lee Min-ho, now commanding the flagship Unbreakable Spirit after being rescued from Kethmore prison, looked out at the most diverse fleet the galaxy had ever seen. Ships from dozens of species flew alongside human vessels, all united by a common goal: to end Vorthak tyranny forever. "I count ships from 23 different worlds," reported Communications Officer Choi Yuna, who had also been rescued during a raid on a prison transport. "The Malari brought 30 ships. The Quellians have 50. Even the Etherians sent their defense fleet." Admiral Quan Jeho stood on the bridge of his command ship, studying the tactical display. The combined fleet had nearly 400 ships, but many were converted civilian vessels with limited weapons. The Vorthak fleet consisted entirely of purpose-built warships with superior firepower. "We have numbers," he said to Dr. Han Seo-young, "but they have better ships. This will come down to tactics and determination." Dr. Han Seo-young had spent months developing a battle plan that could work against superior technology. The key was to use the diversity of the Alliance fleet as an advantage rather than a weakness. "Every species fights differently," she explained to the fleet commanders during the final briefing. "The Vorthak expect their enemies to use standard tactics. We're going to hit them with 23 different fighting styles at once." Park Ji-won, now serving as chief engineer on the Unbreakable Spirit, had worked with alien engineers to develop new weapons that combined human creativity with alien technology. The results were unlike anything the Vorthak had seen before. "The Malari taught us how to make shields that can regenerate," she reported. "The Quellians showed us how to make our engines more efficient. The Etherians helped us design targeting computers that can predict enemy movements." As the two fleets moved toward each other, both sides knew that this battle would decide the fate of the galaxy. If the humans and their allies won, the Vorthak Empire would crumble as conquered worlds rose in rebellion. If they lost, the Empire would become stronger than ever and resistance would be crushed for generations. The battle began when Vorthak long-range weapons opened fire at maximum distance. Their strategy was simple: use superior firepower to destroy enemy ships before they could get close enough to fight back effectively. But Admiral Quan Jeho had expected this. The Alliance fleet scattered into dozens of smaller groups, each following a different flight path toward the enemy. Some groups used asteroids as cover, others used the system's gas giant to hide their approach. A few groups appeared to retreat, only to circle around and attack from unexpected directions. Lieutenant Song Mirai, now a squadron commander, led a group of mixed fighters from multiple species in the opening attack. Human fighters worked alongside Malari interceptors and Quellian bombers, each using their species' preferred tactics while supporting the others. "Stay close to the Malari ships," she ordered her pilots. "Their shields can protect us while we get into attack range. Then break formation and hit them with everything we have." The Vorthak fleet tried to maintain their traditional formation, but the Alliance tactics were too chaotic for their rigid command structure to handle. Enemy ships came from all directions at once, using different weapons and different strategies. Captain Kim Tae-hyung, commanding a group of converted human cargo ships, led them in a maneuver that no Vorthak commander could have predicted. Instead of attacking the enemy warships directly, they targeted the Vorthak fleet's supply vessels and command ships. "We can't outfight their battleships," he told his captains, "but we can cut off their supplies and disrupt their communications. A fleet without coordination is just a collection of individual ships." The Vorthak began to realize that they were not fighting one enemy with a single strategy. They were fighting dozens of different enemies, each with their own tactics and capabilities. Their standard responses, developed over centuries of conquest, were not effective against such diversity. Supreme Admiral Korthvak ordered his flagship forward to restore order to the battle. The massive Vorthak dreadnought was the most powerful ship in known space, armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities and protected by shields that had never been breached. But Captain Lee Minho had been waiting for this moment. The Unbreakable Spirit and her escort ships moved to intercept the Vorthak flagship, even though they were massively outgunned. All ships, this is Captain Lee Minho, he broadcast to the entire Alliance fleet. We're going after their command ship. If we can take it down, their whole fleet will be in chaos. Park Ji-won had prepared a special surprise for the Vorthak flagship. Working with alien engineers, she had developed a weapon that used the enemy's own power against them. Instead of trying to blast through their shields, it would overload their defensive systems from the inside. One shot, she told Lee Minho, as they approached the massive enemy ship. That's all we'll get before they destroy us. The Unbreakable Spirit charged straight at the Vorthak flagship, taking tremendous damage from enemy weapons. Other Alliance ships followed, sacrificing themselves to give the human ship a chance to get close enough for Park Ji-won's weapon to work. At the last moment, when it seemed certain that the Unbreakable Spirit would be destroyed, reinforcements arrived from an unexpected direction. Nam Subin, thought lost during an earlier mission, emerged from the shadow of a moon with a fleet of liberated prisoners and sympathetic aliens who had been hiding throughout Vorthak space. Sorry we're late, he broadcast to Lee Minho. We had to pick up some friends along the way. The Ghost Fleet included ships from every species the Vorthak had ever conquered. Some were prison ships that had been captured and turned against their former masters. Others were resistance fighters who had been building hidden fleets for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. The arrival of Nam Subin's force at the height of the battle was perfectly timed. The Vorthak fleet, already struggling to deal with the chaotic Alliance tactics, suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies on all sides. Supreme Admiral Korthvak realized that his empire was facing not just a human rebellion, but a galaxy-wide uprising. Species that had been conquered decades ago were fighting alongside humans with passion and determination that the Vorthak had never seen before. How is this possible? He demanded of his officers. These species were defeated. They accepted our rule. They cannot simply decide to rebel, but that was exactly what had happened. The human example had shown the galaxy that the Vorthak could be resisted. More importantly, it had shown them that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. The tide of battle turned when Park Ji-won's special weapon finally found its target. The overload device, fired at point-blank range, caused the Vorthak flagship's shields to collapse in a cascade failure that spread to nearby ships. Admiral Kwon Jae-ho, commanding the fleet from his own damaged ship, saw the opportunity and took it. All ships concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. This is our chance. The combined firepower of hundreds of Alliance ships focused on the Vorthak command vessel. The great ship, which had seemed invincible moments before, was torn apart by explosions that lit up the entire star system. Supreme Admiral Korthvak died with his ship, and with him died the last hope of Vorthak victory. The remaining enemy ships, without central command and surrounded by determined enemies, began to surrender or flee, but the human victory came at a terrible cost. Admiral Kwon Jae-ho's ship was destroyed in the final assault, taking the admiral and his crew with it. Hundreds of Alliance ships had been lost, and thousands of brave beings had died to win freedom for the galaxy. Captain Lee Minho found himself in command of the surviving Alliance fleet as the last Vorthak ships fled toward the edge of the system. The great battle was over, but the work of building a free galaxy was just beginning. 3 months later, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered on a neutral space station to form the new Galactic Council. Captain Lee Minho, now promoted to admiral, stood before the assembly to address the galaxy's new leaders. We gather here today not as conquerors, but as liberators, he said. The Vorthak Empire is broken, not because we were stronger, but because we refuse to accept that strength gives the right to rule over others. The former prison worlds were now free. The trade routes were open to all species equally. The great libraries of the Etherians were sharing knowledge freely throughout the galaxy. And on every world that had been touched by the war, there were monuments to those who had died fighting for freedom. Choi Yuna, now serving as the Galactic Council's first director of communications, had established networks that connected every inhabited world in known space. Never again would any species face tyranny alone. Park Ji-won led a new organization dedicated to sharing technology and knowledge among all species.